Who are you beyond your title? That's a question for most high performing people. In fact, a lot of people don't know because from the outside, everything looks like there's progress. It's working, you're growing, you're advancing. For many entrepreneurs and professionals, really, the question creates a quiet tension. The challenge is not ambition. Ambition in itself is not the problem. The problem is attachment. Who are you beyond your title? Have you met yourself? Have you actually had a discussion with yourself? There's a whole difference between detaching yourself from ambition and who you are. Because success needs to become an expression of who you are, not the definition of it. Then maybe the next step would be to pause, even if it's for a short moment, and ask yourself honestly, again, to thy own self be true. Because I always say, the only person you can't lie to is yourself. I am Enobong. Who are you beyond your title? Hello, Coral 8 community. How are you? Yeah, it's me again, Dr. Enobong Ezekiel, your host for our Coral 8, how would I put it, nuggets that we usually share on our channel here. First, let me say Happy New Month. I hope March was great for you and you're so looking forward to, April and all that it holds actually. I don't know how many of you have watched our shorts on Correlate and, our previous posts. Okay, we want to talk on Correlate. We want to be talking a lot about things that refer to leadership, positions, entrepreneurs, executives, things that can help to, guide us and, help us walk through as we do our daily business. Today, I want to talk about who are you beyond your title, that identity crisis that, that no one prepares you for. That's what we want to talk about today. Who are you without the title? A lot of us, tend to see the title as something that is us. Okay. So when I introduced myself, I said I was Dr. Enobong Ezekiel. Yes, because it's what a degree that was earned. However, who am I beyond Dr. Enobong Ezekiel? So that's a question for most high performing people. They tend to avoid answering such a question, not because it's difficult to answer, not really, but because it's uncomfortable to sit with. It's actually an uncomfortable question to sit because who are you without your title, really? Not your role, not your business as so and so CEO, because I can be Dr. Enobong Ezekiel, founder, CEO, Correlate, podcaster, Makamba, But who am I without my role, without my business, without my podcast? Not the thing people introduce you as in rooms. You, actually you. Who are you? Stripped away completely, from the position when you remove, the entire structure. Who are you without the title? What remains without the applause? Who are you when no one is addressing you with those titles? For many entrepreneurs and professionals, really, the question creates a quiet tension because somewhere along the journey of becoming, you become known. That's what usually happens. Recognized, respected, defined. Okay. And slowly, almost unconsciously, your identity begins to merge with what you do. At first, it feels natural when it's happening. Then you introduce yourself at work, okay? By your work, at work, then people begin to validate you with your results. And when that begins to happen, opportunities come because of your expertise. I have had a lot of opportunities because of my expertise. And then over time, the line between, who you are and what you do begins to blur. And then until one day, there becomes no line at all because you don't notice it immediately. It's not something you notice immediately. In fact, a lot of people don't know because from the outside, everything looks like there's progress. It's working. You're growing. You're advancing. You're moving. Okay, and everything looks like that, you're becoming more of something, and that's what you want people to see, and that's what you want people to understand. But internally, something subtle begins to shift. you know your sense of self becomes conditional. It depends on your performance, it depends on your relevance, it depends on whether you are not still needed or not realizing it. Then you begin to carry like a quiet pressure. You begin to carry like that quiet pressure, and then the pressure begins to maintain that identity that you're trying to build. So question is, who are you without your title? The challenge is not ambition. Ambition in itself is not the problem. The problem is attachment. Attachment to the role, attachment to the perception, attachment to the version that of you that the world has accepted. Because once you are attached, every change feels like there's a threat, and every slowdown feels like there's a loss. So I transited between a few sectors, because I went from banking to FMCG to power to aviation. So I've held roles as BBM, DH, and then I moved into becoming a BDM. Then I moved into becoming a BM, then a CCO. Then I moved into becoming a group GM. So I've actually had titles, and when you're transiting and moving, sometimes you feel like there's a loss. Sometimes it feels like there's a threat. So every moment of uncertainty begins to feel like an identity crisis. Today my title is founder, creative director, CEO. You know and and these are titles now that I'm trying to get used to again, and because there's been a transition, because transitions sometimes can be um difficult for high performing individuals like myself, not because of lack of capability, not because I lack the need to separate these roles, or but separation between self and role is very important, because when a business struggles, for instance, it doesn't feel like it's a business problem. It feels like it's a personal problem. When a career path shifts, yeah, it doesn't feel like it's a redirection. It feels like you're losing a part of yourself. When I was leaving 9 to 5, I felt like I lost a part of myself. I'll be very honest. I don't think I've ever come out to say this, outside. But yes, I did feel like I lost a part of myself, because I'd worked for almost 30 years of my life. And then I was moving to becoming a full-time entrepreneur. Yes, I was doing bits and pieces of, entrepreneurship on the side, but this time I was moving to becoming a full-time entrepreneur, and it felt like I lost a great part of myself, leaving 9 to 5 completely, and transiting into my own thing. But when growth demands reinvention, like it happened to me, it doesn't feel very exciting. It feels quite destabilizing. However, so many people resist this kind of change because they don't understand it, and because they don't know who they will be without what they've always been. I kind of felt that when I was transiting, leaving 9 to 5 fully after about 30 years, because I was always identified with something. When I was leaving one job into another, it had a title too. So many people resist change, not because they don't understand it, not because they don't understand it, but because they don't know who they will be without what they've always been. I moved, transited, and I've mentioned a couple of roles. I was always identified with the role, and every time I shifted, it was into another role. But then not suddenly having those roles attached to me, kind of it kind of destabilized me a bit. There is a quieter side to this thing. The moment when nothing is required of you, no meetings, no deliverables, no expectations to meet, just you with yourself. And for some, that space seems peaceful. That happens to me a lot. For others, it seems unfamiliar. Um, Sometimes even uncomfortable. Because when the noise of responsibility fades, there's no clear sense of who you are on the outside. And what do most people do? They fill the space with more work, more engagement, more activity. Not because it's necessary to do that, but because it's familiar. It happens to me a lot. Okay? I'm beginning to learn to slow down a bit, trust me. Because doing things feels safer than facing that problem, that question of who am I? You know, um, who do people really say I am when I'm not producing? Okay. So see yourself as you are a machine in a manufacturing company. Okay. And then there's a downtime when, maybe the workers go on break or something, and the machine has to come to a halt. So it's not doing anything, especially if it is not an automated machine. So at that point in time, the machine is not, who is the machine when it's not producing the beverages or the water or something? That's the same kind of thing I'm asking. Who are you when you are not producing? The truth is, over identification with your role creates a fragile identity. Um, if that's all people know you as, then your identity is kind of shaky. Fragile not because it is weak, but because it is dependent. You're actually dependent on that. Are you on a role where if you walk away, it really wouldn't change who you really are? Because you're dependent on it, dependent on external structures, dependent on validation. Okay, everybody needs to know that you're the CCO, you're the CEO, you're the CEO. You understand? Dependent on continuity, right? And anything that is that dependent can be disrupted. At any point in time, you could be uprooted. What happens when you're uprooted? Are you still you? That's why, the most successful people still feel unsettled. Okay, because not because they have failed, but because they have not fully met themselves. They've not fully met themselves outside of what they do. So my question right now is, have you met yourself? Have you actually had a discussion with yourself? So the question becomes necessary, not urgent, but essential. Who are you without the title? Not in a rehearsed, polished answer, but in reality, in the quiet moments, in the absence of performance. Yeah. Are you someone who knows how to rest? Not distracted, but resting. Are you someone who can sit, yeah, with your thoughts without immediately trying to escape them? Are you someone whose your worth is stable even when your output fluctuates? Okay, even if you have 0 naira in your pocket, are you still Enobong? That's the question. These are not questions of productivity, these are questions of identity. Because at some point, whether by choice or by circumstance, the title will shift, the role will evolve, the structure will change. The structure will change. And then what happens? What remains must be enough to hold you. Okay. When I voluntarily resigned, okay, and left my role in my previous place of employment, I still had an identity because I had chosen to have met myself ages ago and I knew who I was and what I stood for. Okay. Because there's a whole, difference between detaching yourself from ambition and who you are. It's not about, grounding your identity beyond it, because success needs to become an expression of who you are, not the definition of it. That's what success is. Because there's a difference between being a leader and being someone who leads, between being an entrepreneur and someone who creates. So it's going around everywhere. And I'm seeing creative director, creative director everywhere. Between having a title and having a self. And that difference matters because one is situational, the other is foundational. And it's important to know when your identity is grounded internally, okay, you can navigate change without losing yourself. I moved from 9 to 5. I moved into myself. I didn't lose myself. You can evolve without feeling, like you are starting from zero. Okay. You can step into new roles without clinging to old ones. And there was a total detach when I moved out of 9 to 5 and I started my business. It was a total detach. I could move without having to feel like, oh, I was losing out on something. But when your identity is tied to your title, every transition feels like like an erasure. Yeah, every shift feels like there's a threat. Every pause feels like there's a loss of relevance to it. So, how do you begin to separate the two? That's the question. Not by abandoning your work. No, that's not what I'm asking you to do. Not by diminishing your ambition. Again, that's not what I'm asking to you. But by expanding your awareness of self, yourself. You start by noticing. How do you notice? You start by noticing how often you introduce yourself, through without your role. Okay, who are you? I am Enobong. Noticing how your mood shifts, based on your productivity, right? Noticing how uncomfortable stillness feels in the course of it. You begin to create that space. Small moments where you are not where you are not performing, where you are not packaging, where you are not optimizing, right? Where you are not trying to be anything for everyone, just observing who you are in that space. When I left 9 to 5, I took almost a month to try to ensure that detached that I had from what I was doing before and who I was becoming were different. So because of that, you begin to define yourself beyond outcomes. What do you value? What do you believe? What remains consistent about you regardless of the environment that you found yourself? Because identity at its core is not what you do. Identity is how you exist. That is what identity is. And when you understand that identity is how you exist, something shifts, something just shifts about you. You no longer need constant validation to feel secure. You no longer fear change in the same way. You no longer cling to roles that no longer fit. I got to the point role was not fitting anymore because you are now not trying to protect an identity, you're trying to express one. And that expression can evolve without breaking you. So again, the question remains, who are you without the title? Not as something to answer quickly, because you're not going to just sit down in 2 seconds you've responded, but as something to sit with, to return to explore over time. Because the goal is not to remove your ambition, it is to ensure that your ambition is not the only place that you exist. Very important. And perhaps that's the true stability, yeah, that not, that comes from who you are. This question, not from what you build, but from who you are while you're building it. And if this resonates with you, and I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of people who probably haven't thought about it, who probably have not started, around to it, then maybe the next step would be, to pause, even if it's for a short moment, and ask yourself honestly, again, to thy own self be true. Because I always say the only person you can't lie to rather, is yourself. And if you're honestly going to say it, if everything external was stripped away from you, would you still recognize yourself? Would you still be who you say you are, that you tell yourself in your private space, that is the same who you are in your public space? Would you still recognize yourself if everything was taken away from you? So my takeaway to you today, or rather my question to you today, is who are you without the title? Okay. And I would want you to drop comments in the comment section, send us a message if you want us to, deal with this further with you. Okay, because that's part of what Coral 8 is about. We do individual branding, we do individual counseling, we do individual, spacing, we do corporate organizations and all. So if you really do want to get more, get to know about us more and understand what we do in Coral 8, okay, I would ask that you drop us a message, you send us a message, through our email. I am Enobong, and I am the founder, CEO and creative director for Coral 8. At Coral 8, we empower minds, and we impact others. We don't just talk, okay, about growth. We confront what it costs to make you grow, right? And more importantly, who you become in the process. We're very big up on ensuring that we're able to align individuals and organizations to become the true who they really are supposed to be. Until I come your way again, it's been an awesome time. And I hope that this resonates with you. And I look forward to you subscribing, sending us a message, liking our post, our page and our channel, and sharing, and inviting others to come on board the Coral 8 community. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.